Okay, yeah, so thank you and welcome. I feel really privileged to have been asked by the BCS to talk you through successfully leading remote teams and my experiences and best practices around doing that. And thank you to all of you kind of giving up your tea time this evening to come and listen to me talk you through this. Hopefully, as Keith said, my kind of 10 years worth of experience working in a global enterprise, using various technologies and methods to communicate with people in remote locations, and latterly the last 2 years sitting in the UK managing teams in lots of countries but my own. Hopefully that stands me in good stead to walk you through my experiences and best practices, and hopefully you'll find it of use as we go through. Okay, so in terms of agenda, what we're going to do is just start off by looking at what brought us here today, what challenges we face in terms of remote leadership, both from a people perspective and management and leadership. And I'll try and guide you through where to focus moving forwards, and some of the best practices and lessons that I learned within my experience. And then finally we'll wrap up, and there is that dedicated Q&A slot at the end where it'd be great to hear your questions and or indeed any feedback. Okay, so the first thing to think about is why are we here? Having heard my introduction, you may well be asking yourself that question, why are we here? But I think it's probably fairly obvious. For those of you that prior to COVID-19, you may have had some exposure to remote working, but I would hazard a guess that probably the vast majority of people who've joined this conference have been impacted, and indeed over the last few months have been working remotely. And I would also hope that having had that time working remotely, you've experienced some of the many benefits that can bring, definitely in terms of productivity, hopefully reduce stress levels and improve work-life balance, etc. So that may well, have many of us thinking that remote working is the best model, and it may well be for some people. But what I wanted to get across is that actually, before you consider working remotely long term, the leadership around that and driving that remote journey is really imperative to be successful. Of course, it's possible, but I just want to stress it takes a lot of time and effort, and that's something I'd like to explore with you today. So the first challenge, and to me the most important challenge, is the people challenge. There are many things to consider, but for me, at the spine of all of this, it is our people. And I would hazard a guess that many of you, come mid-March, felt an element of fear when you were told to perhaps go home, work, within your bedroom, your kitchen, office, in and around your families in kind of unknown environments. And actually, you probably, hopefully not, but probably experienced a whole host of other factors which you don't want to exist longer term. And for me, as a leader, to eradicate as many, if not all of these challenges that we face when we're working remotely or in isolation is paramount to be successful. So I just want to set the tone that we want to eradicate all of this and look at ways to be successful and bring our people on a positive journey, not a fearful one. Okay, it's a bold statement, but I genuinely believe this, that management is not enough when it comes to leading remote teams. That age-old battle between what's a manager and a leader and which is better and what skill differences there are, has never been more present than leading remote teams. The days of controlling, supervising, directing, they may well work in some environments. I'm not here to judge, but something I've learned is you need to go beyond that if you're genuinely going to lead your teams on a remote journey and be successful at doing it. So if you're a manager and you've had to pick up working remotely, you're going to have to adapt, whether you like it or not. You're going to have to adapt to get the best out of your teams. and which skills or qualities are most important from a leadership perspective. You might not like this answer, but to me, it's all of them. I would struggle to think of a leadership quality which doesn't still exist or is actually magnified by working in a remote environment. So bear that in mind, that we have to focus our leadership skills and hone them if we truly want to be successful. So how and where should we focus? Well, an approach many of you may well have used in the past or seen is something I genuinely do use, and that's to look at it strategically from a people, process, and technology perspective, to use those three buckets to consider all the elements within them and then overlap them, actually has helped me in the past to really define in each of the areas where we are, gap analysis, and where we need to move forwards to. And which of those is potentially more critical? Well, I'm going to say watch this space. Let's now explore each of those in a bit more detail. And hopefully by the end of this, you should get an answer from myself as to what I put with the highest weight. So let's deep dive into some of those a bit more. Okay, rest assured, I'm not going to read this through to you word by word, but I just want to pick up the key elements of process considerations. The main thing here is when people are isolated, working remotely on their own, away from the normal office environment, people very much need clearly defined processes. They need to know how to work, where we're going as a group, as a team, how we can collaborate, the mode of working and our new norms. Because what I found is in any, whether it's remote or on-site working, lack or grayness around processes can lead to kind of people feeling uncomfortable or unsure in terms of direction. And within a remote environment, you really do not want that. You want everything to be as clear and transparent as possible. And to continue to focus on those key things like learning and development, and to be available as a leader so people know how they can contact you, how you're going to be working, to know that you're still available is really important. I've had lots of discussions in the past about meetings. The etiquette, the format, the agenda of meetings in a remote environment really does change. The fact that you're having to rely upon technology is one thing, but actually, once again, people knowing exactly how things are going to work, how they will communicate in those meetings. Some people will be uncomfortable being on video and would prefer to just communicate on chat and things like that. So getting the format and defined format and processes around your meetings is really important. And it may well sound corny, but for me, to try and make them as fun as possible. Some of you may well have experienced of late that, you know, a Friday afternoon virtual beer with the team, non-work related, is a fantastic way to keep spirits high and keep that kind of collaborative team spirit going in that new meeting format. Okay, technology. I'm a technology leader, but I'm not going to sit here today and talk you through the plethora of solutions, platforms that you could explore and tell you which is the best. That's not something this session is about. What I will say is, though, I would advise finding the best fit for your organization, the level of maturity and the user base, not just basing on cost, but basing on the adaptability and adoption of the tools within your business. Video is probably now logical to most of us. We're using it now to get that real kind of touch and feel that you can't get in person. For me, that is the biggest technology thing to use. I'm definitely an advocate of reducing the use of emails, texts, and even phone calls. Video is the closest you will get to that in-person interaction. And certainly when it comes to personal topics or building relationships, I don't think you can use it enough. The same goes for collaboration tools. There are so many options out there, but to genuinely encourage your teams to be collaborating, sharing knowledge, integrating their workspaces virtually is really important to keep that team spirit alive. And there are so many technology solutions out there that can really kind of replicate that office feel of interaction. Same for cloud. I would suggest that ease of access, centrally located files, and keeping people easily being able to use shared resources is really important. And this last one around accountability. I've used things like Planner, the Planner app within Teams, where you can, it's almost Kanban-like, where you can list out the tasks you're working on, prioritize work, time and effort required. And that is not, to stress, that is not a big brother, you know, I need to see that you're busy and what you're working on. Actually, it's that collaboration and transparency amongst the team to know what we're working on and where we're going. Okay, people. I'm taking a slightly different angle in terms of format here, and we'll focus on 3 key areas that are important to myself. And the first one is communication. You might argue communication is a process, but actually for me, what I want to focus on is some of the best practices around communicating as a leader. The first thing to say is more is more. Something I've experienced is if you sit back, almost sit in the shadows, as you perhaps can do within an office environment, you know, spend a day with your head down working on something, that kind of lack of visibility or lack of communication can make people feel slightly nervous as to what's happening, where they're going and what they're doing. And certainly clarity, transparency is key. As I say, people need that clear vision on what is required of you, what you're working on, and definitely to that kind of assertiveness so there is no grey area. The context. I worked in, as I say, clearly English in the UK, working with people in different countries. The content is important, but the context and how you understand language and cultures, etc., for me, almost flips on its head within a remote setting. You may well know someone, I don't know, so the company I worked for was very German-based. I found the face-to-face interactions, you could kind of negate or navigate those differences in culture and language easier than you do remotely. So be really mindful of the context of your communication. I've mentioned working out loud. You know, you have to let your teams know what you yourself are personally working on, and give that transparency from you, so that it goes both ways. Be timely and efficient in your comms. As I say, I wouldn't send a war and peace style email when you can pick up your headset and have a video call, and to be responsive around your comms, to not sit back and have huge delays. I would never recommend reprimanding people or calling people out generally, but I have seen it, unfortunately, within remote environments, and the impact of such activity when people are remote and away from their colleagues is really huge. So I wouldn't encourage kind of reprimanding people. Spontaneous communication is really big. That quick phone call, as I've mentioned, really important. Counting to 10, you know, stopping, breathing, and thinking about, once again, the context is key. And continuous improvement. You know, you need to look at the people you're working with and say, is my communication style working? How can I be clearer for you? How can I share messages in a better way? So that kind of continuous improvement. The next key thing for me is empathy. People's well-being and their kind of head, heart, and hands. We really need to dive into that and understand where people are. It's more important than ever. Bear with me, I've just lost my slide deck. And it's really simple to me. The small things are really simple. Picking up the phone, asking someone if they're okay, do they need support, how are they feeling? It doesn't take a huge amount of effort, but actually it really does help people understand that you care about them. And to be considerate of people's circumstances. You know, many of us probably, you know, working in and around our children or family, you know, in a not ideal location. So be considerate of that when you're trying to connect with your teams. Assumptions and stereotypes. I think, you know, you may well know someone, again, within a work environment, within the office environment, but actually when you go remotely, the same assumptions or stereotypes you have of people can quite often change. So be mindful of clarifying what people want or need within that different setting, and almost adjusting the way you're empathizing with people. A key thing for me is if people genuinely see that you value them almost above the goals of the team, that's a really powerful thing. And in my experience, when people see and feel that emotional attachment to them as people, you'll still achieve those goals. You'll probably achieve them with better quality and maybe even quicker, and you'll have generally nurtured relationships along the way. Okay, the final people topic is motivation. Clearly, this is key whether you're remote or on site, but I think getting shared expectations and a shared vision collaboratively is so much more powerful when people are in remote locations. If they feel like they're part of that journey, and their personal needs and the group as a whole are being listened to and contributing, it really does keep people on board and motivated. Flexibility, very logical, but you know, the more flexibility you're giving people, certainly within a remote setting, I find the more they'll give back. It means a lot to people and keeps them highly motivated. Celebrate your successes, or even acknowledge efforts and commitment during this time is really good. Something I'm really passionate about is empowering people within teams and delegating tasks. If people see and feel that you trust them and that you want them to take ownership, and they're allowed to take ownership and they can flourish within that environment, you'll see the trust both ways can only become elevated. And feedback is clearly critical, and together feeding forward, so looking at how in the future we can do things keeps people on board. And the final one is something I've done in the past, is to join as many collaboration discussions, groups, meetings, teams, training sessions as you can. Not to come in and bulldoze it and be in charge and necessarily even be heard, but so that your team, you're interested, you're listening, you're learning from them. And to continually do that really helps people feel like you're motivated and you're on the journey with them and you're buying into what they're doing. Okay, I wanted to share just some key lessons learned from myself. And the first one is to look yourself in the mirror. I myself, certainly early days, the last couple of years, I had a lot of remote exposure. I felt like I was a strong leader, definitely office-based, but as soon as those tables are turned, you need to constantly adapt, constantly develop yourself, constantly seek feedback, because the dynamic nature of a remote environment really does mean you can't sit still, rest on your laurels and think you're a fantastic leader. Constant self-development is really important. The small things are the biggest things. I mentioned before, to pick up your headset, video call someone, ask how they are, offer support, is a really strong and powerful thing, and definitely gets buy-in and that kind of we're in this together type mentality. It doesn't take a huge amount of effort, and actually you get really powerful results if you do that. I've mentioned already, to experience, an example would be, say, you can perhaps get away in an office environment a day or two, not necessarily speaking to someone within the team. You know, you're busy with other topics and by chance you're not going to see them. You can't get away with that so much in remote settings. I think your availability and having that kind of virtual open door policy, and people seeing and feeling you're there for them, even if you're not speaking, is really important, so that people don't feel that isolation, or they're still not of interest to you, or that you're keen to understand where they are. And change your hat often. What I mean by that is, as I've said, the dynamic nature of remote teams. Whether you're having a truly empathetic, personal discussion with someone, understanding the struggles they might have within their remote setting. Next minute you're reading a large video conference or owning a training session. You really need to flex your styles and adapt constantly to the changing environment or format of your remote sessions to be successful. And the final thing for me, which is at the core of all of this, if you want genuine buy-in from your teams, is to actually practice active listening. It's fine to attend videos or telcos, to nod and acknowledge, listen, and then go off and do your own things, that's not really going to fly. We need that heart and minds connection. You generally need to listen to people within a remote setting and listen actively. So take on board what they're saying, emotionally attached to what people are telling you, and then action it and follow up with tangible output and action so that they see and feel that you're listening to their wants and needs. Okay, my final thought, you'll be pleased to hear, is just to assess if you really want to achieve high-performing remote teams over a longer period. For me, it's absolutely paramount that people outweigh technology and process. We talked about this at the beginning. I hope it's come across during the slide deck. You can have the best technology, the best cutting edge technology solutions with clearly defined processes. But if you've got isolated, demotivated, distant, siloed teams who aren't on that journey with you, you're going to fail. So for me, of course, it's case by case and you need a mix of all three. But for me, if you want to be the best leader you can be and go on the best remote journey you can, people have to come first and foremost, and they have to outweigh those kind of more black and white processes of technology and process. Okay, hopefully you found that of use and there's been some nuggets of useful information for you. It's been amazing to share my experiences and my best practices, and I'll leave the floor open for you now to ask any questions you may well have. Thank you.
Chris, thank you very much indeed. It's Keith again here. A very highly informative presentation and very apposite for the times we find ourselves in. So we're now going to begin answering the questions that have been submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. And I'd perhaps just give people a few minutes to put their final questions together and maybe raise one that had come up slightly earlier. Chris, I take your last point around technology and it being a people and process element first, but are there any particular technology solutions that you think are particularly beneficial for remote working?
Yeah, I mean, the plethora, as I've said, of solutions out there is fantastic. It can be slightly daunting at the same time if people haven't yet decided upon which solution they want to use. And there is no one size fits all. Definitely, there are different solutions which better fit different organizations. I would say for me and my experience over the years, used many things like Skype for Business, WebEx, and many other solutions. For me, the last 2 years, I used Microsoft Teams integrated to Office 365. And I found as an overall end-to-end solution encompassing kind of collaboration tools, dashboards, group chats, video sharing, integrated telephony, even things like virtual whiteboards, etc. I find that the most intuitive and the best solution I've used in terms of genuine collaboration.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Alana, do we have any other questions from attendees?
Hi there, yes we do. Thanks a lot to Chris for the presentation. I'll start with the earliest one, which was a question from Patrick, which asks, in the new remote work environment, I'm finding that the less confident, less social colleagues are now hiding even more in this new world. Any thoughts on how I can tease out some more interaction from these outliers?
Yeah, it is a challenge to speak with people in a kind of open plan office and have those kind of day-to-day normal interactions. Even the most introverted or shy people become accustomed to that over time, clearly through the course of their life. To suddenly have this very quick switch to these technology solutions, it is daunting for people, and I have seen people go almost the other way to become even more introverted. I think it's about, I touched upon it in terms of process and the technology, to find the right format and the right usage of technology. to have a video session, 30, 40, 50 people set up and expect, quite an introverted developer, for example, to stand up on that and give that when you know that's not suited to them. And to keep doing that, to keep kind of cementing that, is really not advised. So I think it comes down to that personal needs and understanding of people to find the right format at the right time to flex your style. So for some meetings, a telco is best, and you'll find, there's people who perhaps aren't as comfortable on video will speak out a lot more. And I think it's something I didn't necessarily touch upon is if you can mix in face-to-face type interactions on site with remote working, which lots of organizations are now going to start doing, I think it does help. And you can then even pick or choose the timing of your meetings and maybe saving up those meetings for when you're on site, if you know that certain people are going to feel more comfortable and even perform better if you're doing that in person. So I think it's very much about flexing your style to the wants and needs of the people within this new remote environment.
Okay, great. We've got another question here, which I think maybe I might ask them to elaborate further, but what is the best practice in your opinion to share technical experience online?
Technical experience? Oh, well, I would actually say it's by using the technologies to share that. So some of the collaboration tools that are as good, if not in some cases better, than being in an office. The amount of documentation you can share and actually walking people through real time different technologies. And as I say, I've seen or done learning and development type sessions using these collaborative technologies. So I think it's just utilizing the tech we've got out there to walk other people through that tech. And if you're in a completely remote type working model where you can't balance in some face-to-face, then I would very much encourage maximizing the kind of capabilities of the tech we can use to educate and bring people up to speed around other technologies.
Okay, great. We've got another question here from Keith. Hi, Chris, great presentation. I'm interested in how to prevent issues before they arise. So are there telltale signs of a team member not engaging, e.g. not using video conferencing features?
Yeah, I think as we've kind of said, it's similar to the other one. If you're truly connected and caring leader, you should have a good handle on people's state of mind, their well-being, and once again, their preferred remote working style and format. I think if you're distant from them and/or you even ignore some of their preferences or where they're comfortable, you are kind of likely or liable to the fact that their state of mind or their lack of desire to get involved will become ever clearer. And that comes down to me again about communication. Don't shy away from that. Have open, honest, and transparent discussions with people. And I think actually what you can find is when you understand perhaps some of their reasons why they don't want to partake or why they feel uncomfortable. I think a good leader will actually be able to balance that out and find some workarounds or adjust formats and styles to bring those people back on board without calling them out or continuing to do that thing which is clearly causing them to feel uncomfortable.
Okay, great. I feel that answers another question we had in from Steve, which was about calling people out in the right way in situations where you can't discuss it face-to-face in person. We have some more questions, actually quite a lot, so thanks everyone for responding. A question from Paul. If the process and technology are the fabric of the business and people are the thread or the glue, do you think the lack of normal old interactions will weaken the business in the longer term? And will the balance shift to employers of choice that can make the change to better remote leadership?
Yeah, it's a big question, and it's definitely a hot topic. As I say, I recently wrote an article about this. I've seen and felt many organisations rushing to get back into the office, almost, I would hope not, but almost neglecting, the many good things that this has brought. and the many kind of positive things people have experienced. It doesn't mean, though, that one size fits all, as I've said a couple of times. I think it has to be case by case. And I think getting the hybrid of those two and giving that flexibility is really paramount. If you've got 90% of your workforce saying they're more productive, they're more innovative, they feel more motivated by working remotely, and you still choose to fill that empty office, you're not going to retain or attract talent or keep your teams on board in the long term. So I think it's very much about assessing the landscape, assessing the wants and needs of people, and finding the right balance for your organization to keep people on board. But as I say, I can't answer and say you must do X and Y to be successful, but I think you should really be close enough to your people, your teams, your technology and your processes to know what should be best for your organization.
Okay, great. Another question from Gavin about distraction. In the office, when someone approached me, I found it easy to shut off from distractions and engage directly by muting my phone and turning off my screen. How do you both avoid distraction and also demonstrate that your colleague has your full attention when the technology is central to communication?
Okay. Distraction is clearly not as intuitive or different using technology. I think almost the impact of making yourself unavailable, muting your line, keeping your webcam off constantly. Once again, it comes into that understanding people's state of mind and well-being and where they're at. If someone sees you're constantly unavailable via the remote technology, I think it almost has a greater impact than if you've got your headphones on in the office and you can just quickly say, look, I'm bogged down with something, I just need some time to concentrate. I think you can do that as well within technology. There's a way of doing that. Yes, it's different. Yes, it might not be as intuitive, but I still think if you need to step away and not constantly be online, there are things like the instant messenger type tools, collaboration. You can set your status to say busy on working on something, I'll be available in X number of hours. So yes, it's not as intuitive, and yes, it can have more impact if you do need to have your own time. But I think there's still a way and the technology to be able to communicate that, to let people know you're not being rude and you're not choosing to be overly distant just for the sake of it.
Okay, great. I think we have time for probably 2 more questions. We've got a question here from Paul. You mentioned training remotely. Any tips for running a workshop online?
Yeah, I mean, some of these are going to be fairly logical, but actually, as I've said, video is key. Yes, we do videos outside of COVID, and intense working environments. We do videos, or training sessions, over audio only. Kind of remote classroom type sessions. So there should be some exposure to that type of training anyway. I think video is key. You can quite easily, as I'm doing now, you can have a key presenter sharing topics. In fact, as you're doing, people are doing now, you can have that kind of in parallel chat, discussions and questions. Once again, it's just different. It's not, nobody on this call now other than you, Alana, and Keith can shout out. That is different. It may well stop the flow slightly in terms of people getting immediate answers. But I think it's just about understanding the technology and that functionality. And most things are there, but definitely video is really key to get across a message, and people will be able to look, see, and feel you as best as possible when you're delivering training or developing people.
Okay, great. So we're coming around to the end of the session, but we have a question about work culture from Bastian. Hi, Chris. You mentioned working with remote teams in Germany. How much does culture difference hinder or enhance performance?
It just, I wouldn't say it. Yeah, it's a really good question. Does it hinder or enhance? I've seen it once again from both sides. Certainly some of the experiences I had was being pretty much the only very few English people within my larger kind of multinational team. People found it easier to understand me and take on board some of the messages I was giving in person, even though there were still some challenges with my English. And doing that remotely, and certainly if you're relying upon text, the English language has its complexities, and that can bring some difficulties. But equally, some cultures or nationalities are a lot more comfortable, an extrovert and being comfortable working in this type of way and relying upon video, and need a lot less encouragement or kind of development to do that. So I can't necessarily answer if it hinders or enhances. I've seen both sides, and I would just stress once again, it's about understanding your teams, tapping into and drilling into cultural, being mindful of context and language, and finding the best model to get the best out of people and hopefully make it an enhancement.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. I'll finish off with these two before I let Keith close out the webinar. But we've got a question from Thayer, who's a university lecturer and is asking for advice because he finds it difficult to motivate his students via Zoom. So advice for how to sort of keep people motivated, which you've already touched on to a degree. And a final question from Steve. With remote teams, what would you recommend for onboarding new people to a team and helping them feel included without being overbearing, assuming we're working from home?
Okay, yeah, so back to the motivation thing, hopefully I covered it off. There's similar factors to me in terms of motivating teams or people anyway. There's nothing especially new at its core, its spine, similar motivational type techniques, but I think you just need that extra effort and extra collaboration. Taking that kind of step forwards with your team will keep them motivated. And sorry, Lana, the next question afterwards, I've lost my train of thought.
No, not a problem. A question about onboarding with remote teams, how to bring someone on in this kind of new remote environment without them feeling, you're overbearing or being isolated too much.
Yeah, I think whether it's onboarding or maintaining or developing existing relationships, the principles are still there. So once again, technology-wise, relying upon video is the next best thing and can still be very effective. Having your documentation or your training material centrally available, getting real-time feedback from someone who started around that material, whether it's multi-person chat, and relying upon video is important. And I would say it comes back to, again, that when you're onboarding, what does someone want or need, and establish that up front. You can set out a 14-day, 4-week plan, whatever it is, but if you set that plan in stone and you don't flex or change that because you think it's the best plan, whether you're on site or remotely, the chances are you're not going to keep every new starter or onboarding process at its best. And I think it's about that very direct and two-way discussion and development as you go through it. Yes, have your format, your kind of framework around onboarding, but have open and honest discussions around, again, how do you feel? Is this working for you? What do you need more of? And to rely upon video, I would say to do that, because you've got that better chance of getting that emotional response from people than simply relying on instant chat and group chats, etc.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to hand it over to Keith now to round out the webinar. Thank you so much for your talk and all the questions you've answered, which I hope people found helpful and was certainly very informative for us. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Yeah, Chris, Alana, thank you very much indeed for that. Some excellent questions there. If you have other questions that you wish to submit, please do contact Alana or me directly, and we'll endeavour to get those answered for you. Now, once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation that you've heard today. So please do take the time to complete that survey. We will also be preparing a recording and a link to today's webinar, and that will be available in due course. Lastly, please also remember our Facebook page, which you can find by searching for the phrase Wiltshire BCS within Facebook. So on behalf of the BCS Wiltshire branch, our panelists Chris, Alana and myself, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. As the current situation dictates, stay safe, Stay alert and maintain social distancing. I look forward to seeing you at a live meeting sometime in the future. Have a great rest of your evening and goodbye.